Welcome to another edition of Between Two Nuts. Today I am talking with Stig Kenobi, and we're going to be kind of talking a little bit about childhood, a little bit of that throwback stuff. But a difference, though, is that we had talked about this in passing before, but a lot of people, when we talk about childhood nostalgia and things like that, it's more or less, people just like certain things and they want to relive that a little bit. And I think as adults who, or quote adults in quotes, we have our own lives now. We have our own homes, our own kids in some cases, and when we're recollecting pieces of our childhood, it's not for me. I would say it's a way of replacing certain things in our lives, but also things that we might have lost and trying to regain a little bit of that better time or nostalgia that kind of brings us back to a little bit of pieces of who we were as kids, that innocence that you have as a younger child too, but also trying to share it with others or share it with your own children. But Stig, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to people in the audience who may not be familiar with you?
Oh, I'm not a YouTuber or anything. I'm just a fellow who gets invited onto YouTube channels. Um, as a as a guest, really,
Mm-hmm.
friend of the family, I guess. Nothing fancy at all.
Friend of the family guest.
Yeah,
we're having steak for dinner. You're like, I'll be over.
yeah.
And Stig, how long have you been hanging around on YouTube? You and I have talked about this before, but how long have you actually been active on streams on YouTube?
Um, maybe a year. I wasn't on too many last year though.
Mm-hmm.
I was on a couple, I think. Uh, DJ D invited me on. I was on Craig's channel on reviews for you,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then people just kept inviting me on. Really,
Yeah, you kind of like I saw you on a couple here and there, and then you became more of a regular on Shenanigans. That's on Mary Mayhem's channel. Which
yeah.
I'll link her info in there too. You'll see it in the description box. But yeah, you can find Stig on there. But he also does have some videos. There's Marvel Secrets on his channel.
Well, about those videos, everyone kept spamming my YouTube channel when I was on stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't have anything because there wasn't a channel there. It was just like a profile,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden I had over 100 subs. So I started feeling bad about it. So
Right.
I just made a couple of videos, just so there's something there.
Right.
So just some silly stuff there. I think it's less than 3 minutes of footage
Right.
spread out over, I don't know, 6 videos. You can binge it if you want.
You might. It's gonna be the best 3 minutes of your life.
I don't know about that, but
But yeah,
but it's
there's
it's
ducks.
gonna be 3 minutes that don't do you harm at least.
Nobody will get hurt in the end.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of those things where people might have seen you around and talked to you in chat. Even I know you always have a presence in quite a few chats, even if you're popping in and out and hanging out for a bit in others. Um, but I guess the first question is when you were a kid, when you were growing up, what would you say would be that one thing from childhood that the first thing you think of when you reflect on being a kid? Like the one thing that pops into your mind when you go, yeah, that's childhood.
Playing with my friends, I think.
Mm.
Being outside, actually. That's the first.
I was gonna
Yeah.
ask specifically being outdoors. Oh my.
Yeah. Yeah. But building a treehouse with a couple of friends.
Ah yes, tree houses. I built several forts, and it was the best times ever being outdoors and just doing that kind of stuff.
That was actually good training in problem solving as well, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not like we could go and buy, material. We actually found it, on the shore, because I grew up on an island. So a lot of, planks and whatever boards drifted ashore. So we made use of whatever we could find.
Right.
It looked terrible, but it was a castle to us.
Right. That's true. And like when you're kids, it's like I remember we had two or three different forts I built with like different friends. The best one we ever had was just this like huge enclosure of trees, and we managed to get a bunch of like different plywood and stuff we had kind of managed to get from. This is post Hurricane Andrew, so we were grabbing like cause there was so much like there was so much what do you call it buildup of trash from different homes and stuff that had been like destroyed. So there was always like a lot of extra like timber and just different types of wood, and we ended up like makeshifting this huge fort and hanging out there. And we would go walk down into because I lived in a city, so we'd walk down to like the newsstand and get like our Marvel cards and other cards we were trading, and we'd go back to our fort, hang out all afternoon, eat lunch there, and then just like play different games. It's kind of more or less just like having like this sanctuary where you could just be a kid. Kind of not like Lord of the Flies, but close.
Yeah, like Lord of the Flies without the murders, right?
Exactly.
Well,
Allegedly.
we had a hurricane in, I think it was 92,
Oh, okay.
and my friend's grandfather's fishing boat
Mm.
got smashed by something and it sank. But it sank next to the boathouse, so they managed to pull it up with a tractor eventually.
Oh, okay.
And they dragged it ashore, at a huge hole inside, and we built kind of like a little fort out of that one. That was pretty cool.
That would be like the best type of fort too, because you're inside kind of the belly of a boat.
Yeah, it
Man,
was still tilted sideways,
right.
but yeah, we did a lot of stuff with that.
See that? Yeah, I would have loved that. Especially when you're little, like it's like a lot of fun to build. I like loved making. I'd see like we'd be out on a couple of the properties my friends' parents would have or something, and they had a lot of trees out there and stuff, a little bit tucked out in the boonies, and um, we would just make these makeshift forts out of just everything. Like it was just so it was easy as a kid to spot places to make forts. You're like, oh, that'd be a good place for like a hangout or a tree house. I never got like a tree house. One of my friends had one that he and his cousins built, but I never got to make my own. But I loved having like that space, I guess, to be able to build things. That was the best thing about, I think, growing up. I remember the tree, like building forts specifically. But I don't know. It's now it's very different, obviously. So it's not the same for a lot of kids now than it was for us when we were young. And it's sad. I mean, it's not like that everywhere, but I would definitely say you're in Norway, and then in case people don't know that, that's where he's at. So here in the states, it's a little different in that way. Like we have a lot more. I think expanded land masses. There's very few places like that anymore that aren't affected by societal and cultural changes that have told parents you can't let your kids go outside and play. There's a lot more of that now. And
Oh,
it's
it's the same here as well.
is it?
Yeah, I actually last year I think it was, I was taking a hike and we'd had snow, and all of a sudden I see three kids playing in the snow, which is something I haven't seen for years,
Wow,
and I haven't seen any kid do that since then.
that's sad.
Just they're they're all inside playing PlayStations or something, you know.
It's kind of that to me. It was like we had game systems, but obviously there's just a lot more saturation of it now. When we were kids, I mean, I had a game system, but I would go out a lot and ride bikes, and that was a big thing. Having a bike was like having a car.
That's also gone away. I haven't
Yeah.
seen a kid ride a bike in years.
And then that's sad because like that used to be a huge deal was having a bike. That was the equivalent of having your own motorcycle or car as a kid, right? You're like, hell yeah, I got the bike. I'm out of here.
Yeah, and they need to have a cool bike as well. That was
Yeah,
important.
absolutely. You had to have like a sleek looking bike. I remember those days of like being able to go out on the bike and be gone all day. Like I would be gone from sun up to sundown, and we'd be out playing in the neighborhoods and going over to our friends' houses or meeting up at the park. We used to
It's
go
basically like Stranger Things without the paranormal stuff.
exactly. because we used to go to the ballpark and hunt for like stray baseballs and stuff like that. And then we'd also go take those little remote controlled cars that were really popular. Um,
Yeah.
I had one of those, like it looked like a dune buggy, and we'd take it out to the park and just go just race them all day, and then go hang out on the swings for a little bit, or just go walk and get something to drink or whatever it was. Um, but ever since then, things have changed so dramatically. Now it's like you don't see very many kids doing anything alone anymore. And if God forbid that they are, because then you got people up your ass freaking out.
Yeah, and even the parents get told off if they let their kids go out and play.
Yeah, like one time, this happened a couple years ago. My husband's sitting out front on the patio, and the kids are playing in the front yard. And this car, and we live in, it's like a little bit of urban, but not really that urban neighborhood. And we get heavy traffic that comes through. This car slowed down and like yells at our neighbor across the street from us, who was outside watering his garden. He's like, "Are those your kids?" Pointing to our children in our yard. And the guy's like, "No." And my husband stood up and he's like, "Hello, I'm here. I'm the father." And he's like, "Oh, you have to be careful leaving the kids in the yard." He's like, "I'm sitting right the fuck here." It was just really bizarre. And he was like, "Oh, you have to be careful because there's some weird people, down the street, or there's this." And I understand it's nice to take care of each other to an extent, but I also think that I think parents have lost their minds. I really do. And I wish I could let my kids go out in the backyard and play alone, so they could actually learn that bit of independence, and this with without having other people feeling the need to helicopter my own kids, or their just stay with your own problems. Like, don't make my problems your problems my problems.
Yeah, it's like something's off about the new generation of parents, in a way.
Yes.
Uh, I remember, I think it was last year, there was a thing on the news. Uh, a kid at school, I think it was a third grader or something. They had recess and he had climbed a tree and fell down and twisted his ankle or something. That was a huge ruckus, and parents made the school, I think, build a fence around that tree and ban kids for climbing trees.
What
Because one,
the
yeah,
hell?
yeah, because it was dangerous for the kids and all that. And I was like,
What?
kids are supposed to do that. They're supposed to,
Well,
get wounds on their knees, or it's part
right.
of growing up, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, children should be allowed, to climb trees and get on their bikes and, learn how to function in society. Like, I think that being, like when we were young, my opinion is that when we were young, we had a lot more freedom, just to take off and get into, well, no offense, but to get into trouble. But it was the kind of it was the best type of trouble, in my opinion.
Yeah, because you learn what's okay to do and what
Right.
gets you into trouble.
Exactly. Because it's kind of like that, I don't know, what do you want to call it? Like that rite of passage as you're a kid, that you should be able to go outside, take off with your
Yeah,
friends, have a good
I mean,
time.
the best lessons are painful, aren't they?
Absolutely.
So yeah, I learned not to run in the hallways at school, because I when I did that once, it was snow outside, so the floor was wet.
Right.
Melted snow. The kids had dragged in, and I was making a sharp turn, and all of a sudden I was flying. Right, I slipped face first into a brick wall,
Oh God.
bleeding like a pig.
Oh my God. Did you break any teeth?
No, no. Um, I don't even remember it hurting that much, but there was a lot of blood. And after that, of course, I didn't run in the hallways anymore.
Yeah, lesson learned.
And I think a lot of the other kids didn't do it either.
Jeez, man. But that to me is one of those things that when we're young, the only way you learn is kind of like from your own fault. Like, you have to learn how to. I think that, like, I got in a lot of trouble when I was young getting into shit, but at the same time, it was how I learned not to do it again. Number one, but also two, learning how to conflict manage my own problem. If you have an adult swooping in every time to rescue your ass, you're kind of in trouble in a real world. And I think that's unfortunately, like so many people brought up, this is why we've ended up kind of with this generation that feels like we need to have, um, more control over everyone's way of lives or what they think or how they feel because that's how they were brought up, you know. And we just had more freedom as children. And as adults now, I look back on it and I'm like, wow. I mean, I used to get on my bike in an urban city and go down to a 7-Eleven and, you know, have to kind of
Yeah,
manage it. You know, like there was no issues with it then, and it still shouldn't be any issues. In the end, it's just people have gained more fear that's unnecessary.
I think what we had was freedom with responsibility.
Mhm. Mhm.
Both of
Very good
those
point.
graphs kind of went up side by side.
Yes, it's true. That's a very good point. Because when you're young, once again, you're going back to, oh, I did this. Now I got to figure out how to fix it. You know, and
Yeah,
it wasn't like you went running unless it was bad enough, mind you. But you didn't go running to an adult though to fix it. Your last because you didn't want to get any more trouble than you already are. Um, but it's a very different world now. And so like when I think of childhood, yeah, I agree with you. I think, forts are always the beginning point, but that was also like that a bit of adventure when you're young. And I think as we get older too, and I've noticed this was actually an interesting observation, is we have so many people now that are older that they hunger for adventure in their lives. So because they don't have like this, I don't know, whatever illusion they think of whatever success is, they get depressed more easily, or they give up more easily, or they stop, learning. They just stop trying to grow or change them, because growing is changing and evolving. It's not a bad thing, but I think because we have a lack of adventure or a lack of, what do you call it, a confidence that's grown, people aren't as happy anymore as they used to be when we were children. Our childhoods in general were very happy ones because we're around the same age. We had that kind of generation where you could take off basically. And that was it for me. It was in a city. For you, it was on an island. But there was this freedom, responsibility included, in a way of also self-regulating how you interacted with the world around you, and those survival skills, I guess.
yeah. It's I guess it was live and learn, kind
Mhm.
of.
Yeah.
Um, if you got into trouble, um, you'd have to face the person you've wronged and apologize.
Right.
That was just the way it worked. If
Yeah.
if you got caught stealing apples from someone, you know, someone's apple tree, you apologized,
Right.
and then you did it again the next week. But
But
still,
it's true. I mean,
yeah,
especially with little ones, like uh, now with like my kids, the stranger danger thing has been embedded in them because that's the reality of the world. But I feel like we're teaching all the stranger danger, but at the same time, we're not teaching them how to function. So you're giving them all this fear, but you're not giving them any leeway to freedom. You're so busy trying to control and protect that you're not allowing them to fail. You
yeah.
know?
I was just gonna say that kids aren't being taught how to fail, and it's been going on for quite a while.
Right.
Because if you look at the people in their early 20s now or younger,
Mm-hmm.
they throw tantrums. You'd never see that when we grew up
Yeah.
at that age.
Oh, I
Well,
know.
all of a sudden, they can't afford the latest PlayStation or something, and they freak out. You
Yeah.
know, it's very it's bizarre to see. So something, I wouldn't say something's gone wrong, but something has changed for the worse here and there. I think not with everyone,
Right.
but it's very visible now, isn't it?
Oh
You
yeah.
know, something's off with the next generation.
It's a it's a very it's a sad generation because in the end, these are kids that were products, in my opinion. They were products of like parenting books. They were products of like the really zealous helicoptering parent that, they thought, well, if I give them all these things and make things easy for them, then it won't be that hard on them later. You know?
Yeah, I saw someone call it the daycare center generation,
Yes.
where they were put in daycare centers, 200 kids or something, and there were 20 people working there that had to take care of all the kids.
Yep.
And of course, they couldn't deal with all of them as well as they should. And the only way those kids could get the attention they wanted was to throw a tantrum,
Correct. Like
and
a infant. Mm-hmm.
that seems to have stuck with them because they learned it when they were kids that this is what works.
Right. Because the parents are so quick to, you know, uh, like your kid. Okay, this was like this is crazy, right? And you have a little a nephew, and everyone has different parenting styles, and there's no instruction book for kids. Despite popular belief, there isn't. But what you can do is listen to your elders a little, meaning like I look back on how I was brought up. I look back on like what worked and what didn't work and those types of things. And also then you have to wing it a little bit too to find out because every child is so different. But I never uh, grew up where I didn't get punished for something. If I, especially like let's say I talk back. Oh Lord. Um, my grandfather, he was no bullshit about that. Like I would get spanked. That was the way it went. If I got really rowdy or I got into trouble, I knew that I was probably going to get spanked. Um, or lose something, meaning uh, be grounded or whatever the situation is. But there was no aiming to please me, like as a little kid. It wasn't about I don't know, what do you call it? People bending over backwards just to appease me or to keep me from having a temper tantrum. So if I would have a temper tantrum, they just let me go. My grandmother would be like, she, because we lived with my grandparents when I was little, and I'd be having a temper tantrum, and she's like, "Well, let me know when you're done." And like a few
Yeah, and
times,
same with food.
yes,
If my mom made dinner, that's what you got.
oh
You
yeah,
know, she wouldn't go to the store and buy something else just because I didn't want fish or something.
right,
If you didn't want what was for dinner, you had to go without.
oh yeah,
And
and
that's actually a very good lesson because it's a very rude thing when someone makes you dinner and you go like, "Nah, I don't want it. I want something else instead."
right,
You know, because someone's actually made an effort to make sure you're fed,
right, and that's
and
what
that
it
seems to
comes
have
to.
gone away completely. And I see it in a lot of friends of mine who have young kids.
Mm-hmm.
If the kid doesn't want to eat, they ask the kid, "What do you want to eat?" The kid says it, and then they go to the store and
See,
buy
yeah,
the stuff the kid
mm-hmm.
wants, which is like, no, don't do that. You're gonna have to do it for the next 20 years or more.
Right, because like when I was a kid, if you didn't eat your dinner, same thing. Either A, I would go without, meaning okay, well if you're not gonna eat, that's it. You're gonna go to bed
Yeah,
hungry, or depending on what it is, um, I would have to sit there until I ate it. And if I didn't eat it,
yeah,
that would be breakfast.
yeah. That's actually that happened to me too,
It is the
quite a
worst
few
feeling.
times.
You see it
Yeah,
in the morning, you're like, oh no.
cold fish and potatoes for breakfast.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, yay me.
Seeing that plate come out of that fridge, you're like, oh
Yeah,
no, not that. Damn it.
yeah. That actually brings out bad memories in my
Mm-hmm.
brain.
But
Still,
I was that way too. Yeah.
it was for my own good.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I didn't like it then. I completely disagreed with it. But in the long run, yes,
Yeah.
it was a good thing.
And I think now I know a lot of people what you're talking about. Like, um, I have, my husband sometimes gets in that mode where he's done that with our kids, and I've had to stop him. I'm like, hun, what would your grandparent? Because this grandparent's very similar to mine, and what would they have done? And he was like, oh, well, that would be breakfast. And I'm like, then this was early on, like many years ago, when one of our daughters started being the picky one. My other two were not like this, but my daughter is definitely the pickiest one, and she gets very moody. So she got dinner for breakfast a few times, and that stopped. Um, but it was, you know, I'm not, this isn't about you. This is about, unless you're allergic, because there's food where she'll refuse to eat it because she doesn't want to. And I'm like, well, looks like you're going to go hungry because that's all there is for you tonight. And, but it's just this eagerness to please. And I think too, it's like, depending on how people were brought up in the types of families that they had, like, um, it's a very different. I think when it comes to the way that people are raising their children versus how we were raised, and in some cases it's for the best. In other cases, it can be not so good. But um, uh, my family dynamic was very different at home. You had your both your parents, and you have a sibling. Um,
Yeah.
and what was that? I mean, I didn't have a sibling growing up, so it's very much like, I got to see the wreckage of siblings, like when they get into a mood, or like if things were good and how things, were. But I mean, what was it like, with how much younger or older is your sister in comparison to your age? And did you guys kind of grow up similar, doing the same things?
Yeah, my sister is 4 years younger.
Okay.
Um, yeah, we had the same upbringing. Lived in
Mm-hmm.
the same house, same rules. Still think she got away with more than I did, but I'm not bitter about it at all. Um, no, we had a great relationship, really, and we still do. So fond memories of my sibling, absolutely. Couldn't have asked for a better sister.
And you're lucky in that way, like to have that kind of relationship with a sibling. I think at the time it can be sometimes annoying, and depends on how old or young they are too. Um, but it is siblings are a benefit. I think they are, because especially for as years go on, I think it's very important to have those relationships. And you know, yeah, I mean, now your nephew has an uncle, right? So there you go. And
Yeah, I have three nephews actually.
oh, okay. So
Yeah, three boys.
oh my.
Oh yeah,
The boys are fun though. I mean, girls are fun too, but it's just different with girls. I think boys, especially when you have around like three boys that are like full of energy, that's a whole nother bracket.
I've noticed if it's only one of them,
Hmm.
the kid is completely calm,
Yep.
easy to deal with. But if it's two of them, especially the two youngest, it's never quiet.
But isn't that kind of true though? Kids will feed off of each other by nature,
Oh yeah,
but
yeah,
so it's like when I look at how my kids act, like the things that they'll do to each other, I make jokes about it, but it really is. In the beginning, I was like, this is horrific. Like they were mean to each other a little bit. My husband's like, normal, normal.
kids are insanely mean. Really.
Man,
Yeah.
I was
The
just like, oh my God. Like the things that they were, doing to each other. I was like, stop it. Like someone's going to,
yeah,
like either missing a body part, missing an eye, something like that, you know?
yeah. I have to laugh sometimes when people go, "Oh, children are innocent." And yeah, sure, the babies are. They're not doing anything, but as soon as they get like 4 or 5 years old, no, they're evil.
Well, they start to. I had a friend of mine. She was like, "Well, you know how babies are. They work you from the time they get out of the womb. So from the time they're out, they're working you. They're always trying to find a way to get resources, or to get whatever they have to do.
They're actively probing for weaknesses.
Absolutely." And she warned me. She's like, "That's the way babies are." And I was like, "Oh yeah," because that was uh, like with my first son, it took a little while to figure that out with him. He was tricky. He was a moody kid. But when I had the second son, I started to notice, like, my because my eldest was old enough where he recognized, number one, there was no threat. He was going to be treated the same as his sibling and things like that. There was none of that jealousy or any of that. We had all these, we had a long talk with him from the beginning. So it was preparing him to be a sibling after so many years of just being an only child. Um, and then when my daughter showed up, she was kind of like the loose cannon cop, and she still is. But it's this very funny dynamic between all three of them of how they interact and get irritated by each other. And I always have somebody coming in here in daylight hours. Well, sometimes night, depends on what the hell they've done to each other. Um, and they'll be like, "Oh, so and so did this." I'm like, if I hear one more tattletale, man, things are gonna get real. But it's I just didn't I never grew up around that. I didn't have siblings, so it's like I'm always curious about some people have really good relationships with their siblings, and unfortunately there's a few too that did not have good relationships with their siblings, or maybe they didn't know them very well because of the age gap. Maybe their siblings were out of the house by the time they were born. But running back to childhood, when how many best friends did you have when you were young? When you were like, I don't
Oh,
know.
a lot, and I still have them, which
Wow.
I think maybe is rare because I speak to my the people I grew up with. I speak to them on a regular basis. In fact, I'm going frisbee golfing with a friend I went to school with since first grade. I'm going frisbee golfing with him later today, and I was the best man at his wedding too.
So like
So
how many like so when you were young, you pretty much still have then your best friends you kind of grew up with then.
yeah, even just the regular friends, still in contact with most of them. And
Wow.
they'll, if they're in the area, they'll pop by and we'll do stuff.
Yeah, see I didn't. Yeah, like I had a lot of best friends or very close friends and I still do, but it's like it's very different. They aren't the same I would say they aren't exactly the same best friends I had when I was elementary school that, cuz I moved. And you just start making new relationships and meeting new people, and that was very difficult because I didn't that was something I had to kind of wrangle in childhood a little bit, was figuring out or as a young teenager I guess, was trying to figure out, okay, well, like, how do I rebuild new relationships with people I did not go to elementary school with, whereas everyone I was in school with had been with each other since they were young. They were like elementary school friends. um, it was just a very different formula. But then I think that helped a lot with adapting to change for me. So I had no fear about moving, for example, or leaving a state, or just up and leaving. I didn't have a problem doing that because I knew it was a small world. Like I was using regular postal service to stay in touch with friends for a long time that were still back in my home state because I moved from East Coast to West. But uh, it's a different. It's very interesting how childhood kind of develops certain things in us, but it is rare to still be friends with people that you knew in elementary school. It's not a negative thing by any means. I think it's actually very cool because not everyone. I mean, I have some friends I still talk to. I was best friends with back then, but it's rare.
I probably have 20 or 30 people
Wow,
that I was friends with when I grew up that I'm still friends with now.
you're very lucky for that, truly, because not
Yeah,
everyone has that.
I think I am, and I probably was lucky because all of them are good people.
Right,
Otherwise, I wouldn't be friends with them. But they're great people, kind people. None of them have gone to jail or anything.
right, and friendships are it's as you get older that obviously your priorities change and people can outgrow each other, or whatever those cases are, and it varies. And um, I have friends that over the years, like, we've kind of gone separate ways and then just kind of reconnected, and everything was pretty much like it was before. And meaning we're still just as the way we talk to each other is pretty much the same. Things have just it's kind of like we can go for many years and not talk to each other because we have so much stuff going on in our own lives or whatever. Reconnect, pick up where we left off, and it was like nothing has changed. So I have quite a few of friends like that, and it's not only like uh, personality wise, I'm like that, and it's not an antisocial thing. It's just I get so busy and preoccupied with other projects or activities that the priority of friendships, talking to someone every day, is less and less because I have so much other crap going on. But it when I was young though, I was accustomed to having friends over. Yeah, I'm sure you guys had a lot of. Did you ever camp or sleep over in your forts?
Not in the force, but we did sleep over at each other's house.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I was in the Boy Scouts,
Mm. Okay.
which yeah,
How long were you in Boy Scouts?
uh, don't know, but there's a picture on the wall above me from 1990, National Boy Scout Camp.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and still in contact with. Let's see, 6 out of the 8 Boy Scouts in that picture.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so,
So,
when you were in Boy Scouts, and do you think that the experiences in Boy Scouts are like very helpful long term? Did you think that you benefited from the experiences that you got from, I guess, camping out with the guys and doing different sport, like trying to earn badges or whatever you were up
um, no, I don't.
to?
Maybe it taught a little bit of discipline though, but
Mm-hmm.
the way I remember it, it was just a lot of fun.
Right.
So it was a I I I'd see it as a venue for kids to have fun outside, with some learning experience, I
Right.
guess.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you're like, well, yeah, I was in Girl Scouts. I was in it for a few years. I think I did benefit from quite a few because they did really push us to uh, try new things. We did take several trips and travel a little bit, and we earned it all, of course. Um, but it was very much, I was in a Girl Scout troop for a very short window, and it sucked. Like, all they ever did was go to the roller ring. They didn't really do campouts. They had at the time I was very young. It was not good. It wasn't a good troop. It sucked, and they were very insensitive to other Girl Scouts that came from less money. Let me say that. And they would have all these parties and functions that quite a few of the other Girl Scouts could not attend because of the cost. And
Yeah,
that to me seemed very insensitive. Um,
that's a gap that has increased, I think,
yes.
these days because I've noticed that kids want iPads and stuff for
Mm-hmm.
for the birthdays and Christmas, and that stuff costs like 10 times as much as whatever everyone used to get for Christmas when I grew up,
Oh yeah.
even with inflation. So stuff like that is not helping because it's making the poor kids way more left out
I agree.
because they don't have an iPad that they can go on social media with. So they're left out of a lot of things. All the talks and fun, the other kids have on social media or something. Or playing games online and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
and that's a big one. Like I know that um, I didn't when I was growing up. I had don't get me wrong. I had nice things and things that were given to me, but I had them for a very long time. And now it's like there's this. You have to have the best smartphones, like you were saying, iPads, computers, laptops, whatever.
Yeah.
and like with my son, my eldest, we didn't have that kind of money, and because he wasn't able to have a smartphone when he was however old or whatever. I mean, now he's quite older, but he would get like shit from other kids, and even other parents would say stupid shit to me. And I was like, I look at them, I'm like, I don't believe in materialism. Like, he doesn't need a damn smartphone. He's not running a corporation, you know?
Yeah,
He's
my
6.
personal opinion is that kids shouldn't get one until they're at least 16.
I agree with that because they can get a
Because,
job.
yeah, but still, it's, I, my nephews use iPads a lot
Mhm.
because they don't have a personal one, but they borrow my sister's and whatever. And all they do is stare at it.
Right.
They're on YouTube watching gaming videos. That's very popular.
Mhm. Mhm.
And disturbingly, they watch commercials for toys,
Yep.
which is yeah,
And and I think there's we have such a big consumer based society, so it's like when it comes to the materialism with kids, like there's parents that are giving them so much stuff, and it's like, my daughter is not even 10 officially yet, and she's already trying to get a smartphone, and I'm like, no way in hell. And yet she has friends with smartphones, and here's the problem: is that these kids with these smartphones are accessing stuff that's highly inappropriate for their age,
oh yeah,
and the parents are not managing that. And how do I know this? Is because of, her friends will have, like, let's say my cell phone number, not realizing that this is not her actual cell, not my daughter's phone, but my phone, and they'll send me stuff that I don't think they expected me to see ever. And I've had to
yeah,
forward stuff to their parents and be like, listen, your daughter's basically whoring herself out, and she's not even 10 yet. You know,
yeah.
it is
That,
that bad.
that's really bad.
Oh yeah.
As for the inappropriate stuff they can find, though,
Mm.
I have to say that back when we grew up, you could access inappropriate stuff too fairly easily.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because I remember when I was probably 7 or 8, someone had gotten a hold of a porn magazine or something from somewhere, right?
Mhm. I mean, that happened a lot. I mean, like seeing a Playboy or Hustler or some other, rag, you know, magazine, and after a while you're just like, whatever. That stuff didn't bother me, but it was because it was so more based in a magazine. Whereas now you have an internet with unlimited amounts of porn and unlimited access, and it's a little bit more dangerous. And plus, you have more access to predators,
Oh
and
yeah,
that's
yeah.
scary.
That's a whole nother ball game.
Yeah, that's scary stuff. And but like when it going back though to a point that you had made about how there's just so much, need. They have to have all this money for, electronics, and those who are poor can't afford these types of things. The lesson isn't really being taught to these kids who are being given everything. They're not going to be happy in the end. Just
Yeah, and
you know.
they're judging their friends based on what their friend has,
Mhm.
not who that person is.
And it's like a life that's a life lesson of going without as a child, because you get more creative when you go without. So,
Yeah,
you know.
I had a lot of friends that were poor,
Mhm.
and a lot of friends that had way more than I did.
Mhm.
But all of us were friends anyway because it didn't matter
Right.
because there were no PlayStations or well, did have the Commodore 64 and all that, so it became a thing
Mhm.
eventually. But we were still outside, and we would put aside, if a friend had an Amiga or something, he'd still go outside and play with the kids that didn't have one, or
Right.
he'd invite them in to play games with him.
Right. But it's like now, with it's there's both good and bad things regarding the internet, but with kids' interactions with each other, like when we were kids, I had friends that go over their house and we would play on, like, Nintendo, either the original or the Super Nintendo, or even like a Dreamcast, or I mean that was a little later, but I mean that was very common. And even networking back in the days when you would network computers in the same house to multiplayer. That was the only way to for a long
Yeah.
time.
Oh, I remember those LAN parties.
Yes. And
Oh yeah.
you get all of us together in different rooms, and some people would bring their computers or, towers, whatever, and we would game. But that was still very much interaction, and we'd all eat together, we'd hang out together before and after, and there was a lot of interaction. And then as the internet developed, obviously that became less of a thing. I mean, people still talk in voice, and which is always going to be there because there's that necessity for human interaction. But
Yeah, and I've actually noticed, with the new consoles, the new Xbox and PlayStation stuff,
mhm.
there's almost no games you can play with someone in the same couch. It's
Yes.
all online multiplayer.
Yes.
The only local multiplayer game really is FIFA and stuff like that.
Right. And the thing is like, you know, the if you start taking away like the human impact of it, meaning you like if you don't have, I miss the LAN parties we used to have. Like that was one thing I definitely missed because even if I had like at the time my son was very young, I would just take him, set him up in the playpen, and he'd be good to go because it'd be at night when we'd be playing anyway. He'd pass out, and I was able to game and hang out, and it was a safe environment, with people I knew, and we had a good time. And there was like no harm, no foul. Everything was very easygoing. And I guess in a sense, when the internet opened up more, and obviously we didn't need to have LAN parties as much um, to multiplayer and all that. Uh, it was easy to be able to get online and do the same thing at home, and that was nice. I would say that's a benefit, but it took away though the human interaction of your friends and things like that. But at the same time, then you met new people online, so it's kind of like you got replaced. Friends that we knew in real life semi got replaced by new friends, and expanding that for better or for worse in some cases. So, but you still had those experiences, and I think that the old LAN parties where everybody would get together and hang out were some of the most fun I think I had gaming in the very early
Yeah,
stages.
I think the most fun I had was when I was like 13 or 14. People started getting PCs,
Mm-hmm.
and we were playing those old adventure games, King's Quest, Space Quest, Leisure Suit Larry,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And a bunch of us would be hooked on one of those games, and we'd, trying to solve the puzzles. In recess at school, one of them would go, if you look in that bush behind that tree, you'll find a coin, right? And if you give that coin to the gnome, he'll give you a carrot, and you can use that for the goat,
Right.
stuff like that. And that's of course gone away because now people can just look up a walkthrough online.
Right.
Back then, you had nothing. You had to figure it out, and we were obsessed with it. We'd have long talks about this, and we'd call each other. Hey, have you? I'm stuck again. Have you found out something new? And
Right.
yeah, that that bit I really miss. It was, I guess it was kind of like multiplayer in a way
Mm-hmm.
because we were all playing the same game.
Yep. And I think
But
a lot of the old gaming, like I remember playing several games where I would get very obsessive about unlocking everything. And I didn't have in the very beginning, like when I had a Super Nintendo as an example, I didn't have a lot of friends that were gaming. Actually, I had very few, and it just wasn't
I
hadn't taken
I
off
had
yet.
too many.
Yeah, see, and I think it honestly affected different parts of the world quicker because of the development of games and access to them, and having more of that out there. I felt like the United States it hit here slower, and so I knew people who did like Commodore 64, right? And I knew gaming with that stuff, and I knew D&D, players and things like that. But as far as like actual video gaming that I was into, not as it was just barely starting to kick up. So I would go and pick up the books. I'd go looking for the books that would go with the games, and kind of the ones that would either give you um, some of the cheat codes, or at least an idea of what you might have not unlocked. I got because I would beat the game over and over again and know that there was stuff I was missing, so I would go and get the book that would accompany the game. Not the one that Super Nintendo would make, but like different ones or whatever. Um, but yeah, like the obsession with like playing games all the way through properly was there for such a long time, and I didn't know a lot of people who were gaming. I got shit a little bit for it, but that's okay. I didn't give a shit. But uh, there was definitely I know I read a lot more when I was young. I know you're a big reader now, even now. But would you say you were a big reader when you were a kid too?
Yeah, the first stuff I started reading was comic books.
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man and X-Men and the Hulk. That was the That was the first stuff I started reading, and then I got a bit obsessive about the Hardy Boys. I had a bunch of
Oh.
yeah, I had a bunch of those books.
Now, was that the original Hardy Boys, or is this like the revamped versions they did later on? Like the, I
Don't
guess, newer stories, I guess.
I don't know, early '80s. The books were old.
Okay.
God, yeah, it was probably the originals
Mm-hmm.
because some of them I got from my dad. He had them when he was a kid.
Oh, okay.
And well, the first book I read was Treasure Island, which is a great starting point for any kid.
Yes. Yep.
And then I moved on to westerns,
Oh,
and then I
okay.
got started getting hooked on the Savage Sword of Conan.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they were a bit gritty, and I think I wanted to read those because it said on the cover up in Norway that this is for adults. So when you're a kid, you absolutely have to read it because it says it's for adults, right?
Right.
Um, and then a friend of mine introduced me to the Lord of the Rings.
Oh, okay.
I read that when I was 14, I think, and I figured I need more of this.
Oh,
This is
yeah.
great.
Mm-hmm.
So I read The Hobbit, and then all of a sudden I realized, hey, there's other fantasy writers.
Right.
You know, Terry Brooks became a huge favorite. Raymond Feist, Robert Jordan, a bunch of them. I just kept reading, and early on I realized, yeah, hey, these books are cheaper if I buy them in English because the translations were expensive.
I bet.
So I haven't read a book in Norwegian, I think, since I don't know, 95, 96.
Wow. Well, honestly, if it saves the money and you're still getting the story and maybe possibly the originating language too,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
going to be a little different. And actually, in the end, you'll be getting the original story in the actual language. I think it makes a difference, with anything you read. If it's translations aren't always the most fantastic, they're as close as they can get sometimes.
yeah. There's a lot of poor translations, but I think since then I probably read between 10 and 30 books a year.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, I just like it. You know.
And I got into the Lord of the Rings when I was pretty young. I was reading a lot of different stuff. I liked for me I got into folklore, urban legend stuff first when I was young. I loved that stuff. I liked the unknown. I liked stories of that kind of nature. I liked the whole mystery sagas and things like that. But I got into fantasy through The Hobbit, and I was fascinated by the whole idea of it. And I went into Lord of the
Well,
Rings later.
fantasies though are basically you're reading a mystery as it happens
Right.
because
I
there's always something getting solved at the end.
exactly because like the Lord of the Rings, the whole idea that he wrote his own language. There was a written language for the Hobbit, and there was the alphabet was in there. And I'm looking at this because you're actually seeing in the story this written language and having to translate it to some extent. Now they have other versions of it, but I had a very old copy of it that someone had let me borrow, and I was absolutely. This was just amazing to me. I was like, wow,
Yeah,
you know.
it it's because of it's immersive.
Mm-hmm. Because I felt like I
I
was
think.
picking up someone's diary and
Yeah,
and reading it, and it was like, ooh, I'm in somebody's business, but it was fascinating, and I was like, this is
do you know
amazing.
who Tolkien's most important character is?
What it?
It's Middle Earth.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
that
because
makes sense.
the world is so fleshed out. It's a character of its own, and it wouldn't work if he hadn't done that.
He was.
All the lore, all the maps, all that stuff, it just adds and adds to the experience.
It does, and it is like this place exists. Like in my
Yeah,
mind, I really after reading The Hobbit and then getting into Lord of the Rings, and it was like visiting that place, or it was like reading historical manuscripts in a sense. You
yeah,
really felt like you were looking at historical logs, and this was
yeah,
an actual place, and these people had existed, and who the hell knows? It's very possible. I believe in ulterior things. I believe in different realms, but you never know. I mean, that's how detailed and specific it was, and well done, and far beyond its years. Uh, to read that whole entire series, and then you can reread it and still find new pieces to it that you didn't catch the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think J.K. Rowling did this well too with Hogwarts, because that school is so fleshed out,
Mhm. Mhm.
and it's tied to the magic system in the story. So that's why it sells,
Right.
because it's a very believable. How does it go? Um, Believability in an unbelievable setting. I think
Right.
that was how it went.
Mhm.
No, realism in an unrealistic setting,
Right. Same.
which is important. It's what made George Martin's books so popular too, with the Game of Thrones, because the world feels real. He's done all the hard lifting, creating
Yeah.
all the families, all the lore, all the history.
And that's the thing about a lot of the book, like the Harry Potter series. I'm not a huge fanatic about it. But my son read them. Plenty of kids did. Or at least I knew, and also adults. And it was, the development of the characters and the development of the story and the places. I can appreciate that for sure. I'm not a huge fan of it, and because I just couldn't get into it. Um, Not my thing. I'm just not the right fantasy angle for me. But I understand why people enjoy it. But it's just one of those things. Like Perp is devastated by me saying that, but oh well. But I can't get into it. It's just never got, like, for me. I really more clung to, like, the Lord of the Rings, and the films were fantastic. I was not disappointed. Um, it was for me. It's like, when you're in childhood, I really enjoyed the medieval stories and the fantasy based stories. I love the action and adventure stories, and that to me was what made things much more exciting as a kid. Was like, ooh, the whole idea of having an adventure.
Yeah,
Um,
because when you're a kid, you have an insane imagination, and
yeah,
stuff like that just feeds into it.
yeah,
So it's a good thing,
oh
because
yeah,
it feeds creativity and imagination, all kinds of stuff. But would you say, if you had grown up today, or even if you even back then, if you'd had an iPad and access to Netflix with thousands of movies,
mm-hmm.
would you have bothered to read if you
That's a
had
good
that?
question. Um,
I don't think I would.
I was thinking about this before because somebody asked me about the whole Kindle thing, which I don't like. As an adult,
No, me neither. I have to have a book.
yeah, I like physical copies. I would much rather
Yeah,
have those.
yeah.
But
Sorry, trees.
right, I'm like, I'm sorry, but I don't want to have like a glitch and lose all my books. Like that seems terrible. I just like having that physical copy. But
It feels artificial.
it does. I mean, I was reading. Somebody sent me a copy of a book or whatever they had done, and I was like, send me a physical copy because I can't read this shit on a Kindle or on my computer. Um, it just feels like I need to be able to touch the book and look at it and read it to my leisure and not be
Yeah,
stuck to a screen.
everything
Um,
about it feels wrong, because it's not just about reading. It's about sitting in a comfortable chair, reading, holding a book, and smelling the book,
right.
and the sound of the pages turning, all that.
And there's
It's
solitude to it. There's a solitude and kind of like a nice content feeling of just being in your own little space as opposed to still being, I don't know, connected, being linked into something.
yeah, it's
Um,
a process.
yeah, because when you're reading a book, you can literally unplug. And when you're reading a Kindle, I feel like I'm still stuck in a rat race. Like I don't like the feeling of always being plugged in. And I agree with you. If I had, let's say I grew up during this time frame, and I wouldn't be reading books. I don't think I'd be reading a whole lot. I've noticed that a lot of people don't read. You know.
Yeah, and when you read, everything happens in your mind, and there's a huge process going on. And I saw someone had done research about it, and of all the entertainment mediums, out there, books are the best
Yeah,
because you're concentrating, you're visualizing what you read, and you're thinking about what's going to happen next. You're
correct.
remembering what you read yesterday, and sometimes, in my case, you also have to translate
Right.
in your mind. While if you watch it, if you watch TV or a TV show, it's a passive thing. You're sitting there just getting fed.
Mm-hmm.
Even though if it's an educational movie, you're still sitting there getting fed, doing nothing, yourself. And I saw video games, if it involves some kind of thinking or
Right.
a strategy or puzzle solving, anything, even just making story choices, it's a form of two-way communication,
Yes.
which is better because you do something, the game reacts to it, then you react to whatever the game does.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So all of these are better than movies,
Right.
better for your brain, really. And I'm a I love movies, but I have to agree with that stuff.
Well, yeah, because I mean, when you're picking up a book, I remember the excitement of buying, like going to the bookstores, like the physical bookstore, and getting that book that I was looking for, or just browsing and looking for something new, maybe something that I wouldn't have otherwise found had I not been looking. And because I got into uh, faith and spirituality studies when I was younger, and that was more or less just by accident. And I started studying like uh, Asian religions and cultures associated. Because when you're studying faith or let's say religion in general, you're studying history of people. So you're having to go back into a culture of why people believe what they do or why certain governments do this or and interact with their people. And I thought that was fascinating because I really enjoy world studies. I enjoy learning about other places in history of other countries and like where their roots come from and why people still maybe they still practice some things that they don't even realize is from their actually founding roots. And so I got into faith studies just by walking down that book aisle, and it was a very exciting feeling to find that book that I you've been looking for or you knew was coming out, but it just wasn't available yet. And being able to bring that home, or going home with a full bag of new books, or going to the used bookstore and finding a book that was hard to find before. And I've been very lucky, I will say this, at least for people like us, at least who still appreciate old, like picking up a physical copy of the book. It's been a little bit easier to locate books that I never would have found, prior, because there's less people reading, which is a shitty thing to say.
Yeah, it's even the covers of books that were cooler back then.
Yes, they were. They were very
They
much
just
like
made you want to
pick it
read.
up.
Who's this cool looking elf with a sword, right?
Right. And they'd always have like, well, either really gorgeous art, or they would just have like, because even if I took the sleeve off on some of the books, the actual hardback, I love hardbacks, but the hardback cover would be even more like some of the I at one point I had all the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, but they were special edition ones, so they had like the leather bound on them, and they were beautiful books, and I just loved looking at them on the shelf. And now it seems though that there's less and less of that appreciation for having a hardback or having an actual physical copy of a book. And I've been able to find quite a few books that I'd been looking for a long time for like pretty affordable prices and stuff like that. But uh, it's sad because it's a double. It's like a catch 22, where you know they've stopped printing books now for several titles. So it's like I'm having to hunt for books that they stopped printing.
Yeah, I've been scavenging eBay a lot myself, looking for the old Star Wars books.
Another good place to check as well for books is Abe Books, ABE Books, um, online, and
Did
they. I'm sorry.
did it did it ship abroad though?
Yes, quite a few of them do. Quite a few of them
Hmm.
do. So it's kind of a hit or miss thing. But if you're looking for hard to find books, I found a few because I was looking for some hardback. These books I had as a kid that my mom had gotten me. and they're hardbacks, but they're for like beginning readers. And I was looking for them, and I couldn't find them anywhere except that website. And I got them for like $2 or $3, and I was very excited about that. But one of the sellers was from the UK, so I had it shipped over. Um, but there's quite a few sellers all around the world that are on there. So it's a very cool site to check out for books. Like very hard to find, even antique books. They have a bit of everything and newer books as well. Very helpful site though. Um, but if you're looking for your Star Wars and any fiction or nonfiction, whatever it is, take a look at that site. It's very helpful. Um, I've referred that site a couple of times just because it's, man, they've had stuff there I didn't imagine I'd see. I was like, oh, well, damn. I was like, oh, I guess I don't have to look because eBay wasn't working out, and I was getting impatient, so I started hunting for like used book sites. And I happened to come across it one day, and I've been using it for years now. So it's very helpful. But for anybody interested as well, it's a good site. But it's Abe Books, ABE, and then books, and
Hmm.
it's very cool. And but yeah, like as far as though when we look back at, I guess where we're at right now, in like I guess or in our society, it's kind of like I don't really know where we're going to go from here. Like, how are things going to go for future generations based on how things are, where we're at this exact moment?
No, it's up in the air, isn't it? So something has to change because I hope I'm wrong, but I don't see this developing in a good way.
I, yeah, I was thinking of this the other day. I'm like, well, where are we going to go from here? You know, like I don't really, I don't have an answer for that. I want to think optimistically that things will get better, something will change for the better. But I feel like in order for people to be successful, they have to fail. I mean, truly fail. Like, and not like to hurt them, but to empower them to overcome something. And I think that people have misplaced their objectives. They've misplaced what's important because they think, well,
Yeah,
that's outdated or that's not that big of a deal. And
it's
understand,
overprotection, really,
yes.
and that can backfire very fast because
Oh, yeah.
kids aren't equipped to deal with any kind of adversity
Mm-hmm.
anymore.
It's true.
I
Because,
mean, you get medals just for participating now. So where's the sense of achievement?
yeah. I mean,
And why would they even have goals? All they have to do is show up and they'll get the same medal as everyone else.
right. I mean, there's the ambitions that people want to have. Um, Not everyone's going to be a winner, you know. Not everybody's going to walk away with a prize in life. And there, I read some disturbing article the other day, or I think I was listening to a video and talking about news stories and different things going on. And there's just the suicide rates have increased. And,
Oh yeah,
in very young people, these aren't like, someone who's in their 80s or 60s and they have, health stuff going on. There's not like a pre existing condition that's contributing to this feeling. It's just they don't know how to tackle anxiety or,
yeah, and there's a lot more bullying now, a different kind of bullying that we were used to.
yes, I agree with that. I do see that more often, especially on places like Twitter. Um,
Yeah, anyone has to do is make a fake profile and bully the hell out of someone they don't like,
right.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and just gang up on someone. Fake profiles constantly, you know. It's a whole nother ball game than what we're used to.
And, these the kids pay the price for this stuff long term. So they don't really, at the beginning they aren't seeing that this is negative to them. They're not understanding that uh what's the word? Just because they aren't getting their way doesn't mean they're being punished. There's this is like a, I guess I hate to say this, but it's almost like their parents didn't parent them because like we had talked about much earlier on in the conversation, is that they were put in daycare centers. These are daycare generations where they didn't have a parent there present with them all the time, or at least a good portion of their time. They were, I was a latchkey kid, so I know what that experience was like as a young person. But I grew up around, I went to school with, like, I would say early millennials, and they were completely coddled. And I was not accustomed to that at all. Like, meaning like having their parents up their ass about everything, things that didn't matter, like just stupid shit. And there was always like yelling and screaming in the house and a lot of disorder. And I didn't grow up like that, obviously not the perfect household either, but I definitely had more freedom because I was in a situation where I had no choice. And I grew up also with daycare a little bit, and it sucked. I didn't, there'd be days where I wouldn't really see my mom at all, and that would contribute to me getting into trouble. And not really having a parent around full time, or at least somebody home, somebody around, even when I got home from school, even if they were working during the day, I didn't have anybody I would see at the end of the day. And by the time my mother would get home, I was already getting ready to go to bed, if not already asleep. And that's the kind of lifestyle a lot of these kids are dealing with, but with two parents not present, and even when their parents are around, they're not there. It's like they're in another place, and the priority of being, uh, of being a family and having dinners together, or just at least talking to each other every day. If you can't all make dinner at one time, at least making the time to be there with one another. But now you have an entire generation where their family is now turned into social media.
A friend of mine actually said that he has two daughters
Mhm.
and and a girlfriend. They're they're not married yet.
Mhm.
But I messaged him, I think a few months ago, and I said, "Hey, what are you up to?" "No, I'm just playing video games." I'm like, "Okay." And then he makes like a joking comment that, "Yeah, because I've just made myself dinner, and my girlfriend is in the living room watching Netflix, and the girls are in their rooms watching Netflix on their iPads or phones or something." I was like,
Wow.
"Whatever happened to the living room? Remember that?
Yeah.
Your family would gather in the living room,
The family
play
room was the
board
family.
games, or
Right.
yeah, watch a movie together, play board games, card games, stuff like that. The living room is dead,
Mhm. It's true.
which is another thing we've absolutely lost. I think
Oh yeah, I agree with that. Because
the
it's, unless,
the comfort and fun of the living room.
like, I remember um back in Arizona before we moved to New Mexico, and even then, still, we would have game night. Um, like my friends used to come over there, and we'd all play, like, whether it was Monopoly or some other random game somebody would bring, different card games, things like that. We'd all hang out, eat dinner, hang out, and just have fun. Right, the kids would be all
Yeah,
there, and it would be a lot of fun. And my friends would bring their kids, and the kids would go and raise hell, because that's what kids do when they hang out together. But we were all hanging out together. It wasn't people parked in front of, screens and not talking to each other. So there was conversation and antics, and we would talk about different things, and it would just be a lot of fun. But um, it's gotten further and further away from that, and I do miss that. I miss like trying to get the kids to, well, I can get my younger ones too, but my eldest is a pain in the ass. Um, to get everyone together to play game night or whatever, but having family games and spending time together, it's a lot of fun. Having your friends over and having their kids come over too, and everybody just hanging out. I miss that stuff, but it's like we've gotten further and further away from that, and the community that we live in now is very different. Where you see a lot of families doing things together. But yeah, screens are always out though. Cell phones are always out. I'm like, God, man. I like to pretend I don't have my cell phone on me most of the time because I hate that feeling of having to check all the time. I don't like it. Drives me nuts. Um, anyway, But I want to thank you though for hanging out with me, Stig. And I had some technical
Oh,
issues earlier.
oh,
Um,
I had a blast. It was great.
there is this. We had talked about doing this earlier, and I did not forget. But I'm going to ask you some questions because you brought this up, and I think it would be fun. For those in the audience who have never seen Inside the Actor's Studio, um, it was a show hosted by James Lipton, and he'd have different actors on and so on. But at the end of the show, he would always ask 10 questions, and it came from, it's like I think it's Pivot, Bernard Pivot, and it's the Pivot questionnaire. And these are 10 questions that he would always ask at the end of every episode to every actor or performer that he would sit with. So I'm going to sit here and ask Stig these questions. Stig.
I'll try to make clever answers.
So, Stig, number one, what is your favorite word?
Kindness.
Okay. All right, what is your least favorite word? That's a hard one.
Yeah. Um, Abuse
Okay. All
in
right.
every sense of the word.
Okay. I was going to ask you, but yeah, it's like a very, just a nasty, ugly word.
Yeah. There's nothing positive about that one.
Mm-mm. Okay. Third question is what turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Um, People who create things for others to enjoy, to make others' lives better.
Okay. Now, what turns you off?
Uh, I guess cruelty.
Mm.
Yeah, people who do stuff just to be cruel.
Mm-hmm. Number five is what is your favorite curse word?
Fitte,
Oh.
Fitte.
What does that mean, Stig?
In English, well, keep in mind this isn't as bad a word over here as it is over there,
Right.
but it starts with a C,
Oh. Oh
and
my.
it's part of the female anatomy.
Oh my, we all learned a curse word today. Oh man. Okay, what sound or noise do you love?
Um, the ocean at night when the tide comes in, and
Mm.
there's no wind or anything, and there's no sound, just the ocean brushing against the shore.
Yeah, that's a very specific sound too, because
Yeah,
you hear the bubbles from the
yeah,
shore.
it's incredibly calming.
Mm-hmm. Now, what sound or noise do you hate?
Sirens,
uh,
because it means someone's in trouble or something bad has
right,
happened.
exactly.
And I hate the noise.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Like,
it's one of those. It's just a terrible noise.
yeah, there's nothing good about it.
Uh, what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I think, well, I have done some work in this, but writing books,
Hmm.
I think that would be nice. Or park ranger,
Park
looking at
ranger.
looking after some outdoor area.
That'd be
I don't
cool
know.
though, because I mean, there's all
Yeah,
types of park rangers and there's all types of landscapes. So
yeah,
it's a what do you call it? Unmeasurable
um,
amounts of places
yeah,
to be.
mountain forest area. I think.
Okay. And what profession would you not like to do?
I would not like to be one of those people who have to collect sperm samples from horses. I'd have a stroke if I did that.
Oh God, that's so
Sorry,
gross.
I realized I hadn't made a pun in the whole episode.
You're like, no, I did. Went full circle.
Yeah.
All right. Now the last one is: if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Um, I'd like him to say It's okay that you were wrong about me. All your friends are waiting behind the gates. Go have fun.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah, these are fun questions, and highly recommend that. But that show for people if they haven't seen Inside Actor Studio. It's always fun to hear different reactions. But I really do appreciate you hanging out with me and your patience and stuff.
Yeah, I'm a patient fellow. Don't worry about it. It's
But
all good.
on the screen, what people will see are pop ups that will show you Stig's channel and also his Twitter. So please check him out on both and follow and check out his 3 minutes of content on his YouTube channel.
Yeah,
You never know.
don't sub to me, people. I'm not a YouTuber. It's just, you know.
But you can if you want to. You can sub if you'd like. He's just not going to have a whole lot of content, but you can follow him, though, also on different channels that he appears on, such as Mary Mayhem's channel. I think
Yeah, and
yours.
Chris Knight at the Real Review 3000.
Yes.
We do movie talks. We go in depth talks about movies. We did Jaws last time.
Nice.
We've done Blade Runner and Falling Down with Michael Douglas
Yes.
and
It's a good movie.
something else.
Um,
RoboCop.
that's right.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can check. I'll make sure to add in those links to those channels so you can check out Stig on there with Chris and others. And do you have anything coming up this week or the next week or?
No, just shenanigans on Fridays.
Okay.
Uh, that's
Yeah.
just my regular thing. I haven't been on YouTube that much lately.
Yeah.
Been doing other stuff.
Yeah. It's been a busy. It's already October and it's already acting like the holidays are here any moment. So it's gonna get a little weird. Everything's gonna get busy for a while for a lot of folks.
Yeah,
Um,
I realized I shouldn't be on YouTube more than YouTubers. So I had to cut back. I was saying yes to everything, and
well,
got too much.
I really appreciate you know, hanging out and chatting with us, and I hope that everyone does go ahead and check you out despite it, and follow you on Twitter at the very least. And I should have a couple other. This will be posted hopefully this week, and I have some other interviews that are scheduled out, and hopefully those will be popping up soon as well. But thank you so much to Stig, and thanks for everyone who's listening. Have a good afternoon and or evening wherever the hell you are.